Don't even worry about the principal guy. It's not about him.
Yeah.
It's not about him. Look at Bernadette. That's where the story's happening.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to No Script, an unscripted conversation about theater's best scripts. I'm Jackson, that's Jacob, and we are excited to be jumping back into another conversation fully underway in this season, I would say. We're kind of cruising now, flipping back and forth between genres and different sorts of plays. If you're listening along, we just got through with a really heady, historically steeped play, and this is just a lovely play to kind of move to after that sort of weighty playness.
Yeah, we didn't say this last week, but I feel like rock and roll from last time, not that it's a great idea for us to spend a lot of time talking about last time, but
Right.
rock and roll from last time, I think is I was thinking about this, is the closest that we could get to a modern day Shakespeare play.
Sure.
In terms of the number of characters and the number of scenes and the location changes and the complexity and the fact that half the time you don't know what anybody's talking about. But all that together, it's very comparable. By contrast, today's play, very lovingly titled Surely Goodness and Mercy by Chisa Hutchinson, is kind of the opposite of rock and roll. This is and I mean this in the best way, a small play. A play that is both short in length in that way, but also it's about one moment in time rather than rock and roll, which of course spans decades. It is about one family. It's really about one little boy and his school lunch lady. And if that sounds delightful, that's because it is.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, this play does sort of focus on relationship, focus on the way that little actions can mean a lot, or sometimes big actions can mean a lot as a result of a kind of focused relationships. And I think this play really, I'm excited for the conversation too about how this play pretty artfully and very skillfully focuses our attention on this story, on this kind of core element, in the many sort of ways that you could be drawn into one character or another story in this play. This play really focuses you in a really cool way.
Yeah, it's a play that's very material in a kind of proppy, costumey way.
Yeah,
that really, really matters. We don't talk a lot about production of play, how this play would be produced on stage. But this play, the costumes, I think, are super important, especially Tino, the protagonist costume, who we'll learn more about, is a pretty large part of the storytelling resides in his costume.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that certainly there's some pretty particular props, and the way that we change locations pretty quickly also is helped by what is sort of surrounding the characters. So yeah, there's lots of great elements to chat about in this play. Looking forward to it.
It should be a good conversation. Before we get too far into it, we are going to invite you to head on over to our Patreon page, patreon.com/NoScriptPodcast. Again, that's all one word, no hyphens, no underscores, patreon.com/NoScriptPodcast. That's where you can become a supporter of the show. This show is in our 15th season, has been rolling since 2018 because of our patrons. We love to do it. It's a great privilege to talk about plays like this, but it's not possible for us to do without the support of viewers like you. At some point, PBS is going to come for us for using this slogan. So,
I don't know.
Yeah, not anymore, maybe. A whole different thing going on there. Viewers like you make this show possible. If you're one of those patrons, if you are supporting us over on our Patreon, big thank you to you. Honestly, genuinely, the show happens because you are able to support us. If it's not you yet, at least think about it, consider it. Check out the Patreon page. Our patrons get different levels of perks. That's how Patreon works, depending on what you give. And there's different tiers. Lowest tier, $1 a month, $12 over the course of the year. And even that level is so super helpful to us for making this show go. So big thank you to you. If that's you, if it's not, check us out. Patreon.com/NoScriptPodcast. And now, back to the script.
There we go.
Okay, so this play was commissioned in 2016. I'm not going to do a lot more on Chisa Hutchinson. We discussed her last season in our themed month on scary horror plays. Chisa Hutchinson's play Whitelisted was the play that we talked about as part of that. So you can reference that episode. Go back if you haven't yet. Listen to that episode if you want to learn more about Chisa Hutchinson and her career. She is, I don't know about best known, but she's also very well known as a screenwriter. Interestingly, this play I felt like had some screenwriting vibes, like felt akin to a screenplay in a lot of ways. But she did get this commission from the New Jersey Performing Arts Center and the Writers Theater of New Jersey in 2016 for this play. It ended up having then what we call rolling premiere across a couple of places. The Writers Theater in New Jersey in 2017, and then later that year at the Salt Lake Acting Company. And then it premiered at the Red Twist Theater in Chicago in 2018. And then the big production that you'll see most of the materials online about was the off-Broadway production in 2019 at the Keene Company. So many awesome materials out there about that. Interviews, some great montage clips, some really great, like more like theater professor kind of academic level conversation around the play built from that production. Really, really cool. In 2021, the Passage Theater produced an online version of the play. This is, of course, coming out of COVID. Now, what's interesting about this that I found is that they were pitching is maybe not quite the word I want, but they were presenting this play as, and this is where I'm just quoting, part of their theater for families and young audiences sort of deal. Now, the reason why I find that interesting is that as I looked at some of the other productions, some of those other productions included a warning about the content of the play that it may not be appropriate for young audience members because of some of the things that Jackson will probably tell you about in terms of the sort of content and context for the play. So that's an interesting one to me. Is it theater for families and young audiences? Is it very much not for young audiences? Apparently, the production companies disagree, and I'm just fascinated by that. That's wild to me. When I saw that it was part of this families and young audiences series, I was like, what? That is very much not what the other theaters were doing. Very cool. I don't know. That's awesome to me. Last production I could find in Rochester, New York at the Blackfriars Theater in 2022. So revived after COVID. That is spectacular and wonderful. And that's just a little bit about the life of Surely Goodness and Mercy.
Yes, indeed. Excited for the conversation today, so I'll just give us a short summary of this play so we can jump into the conversation about it. This play takes place, I would say, in our current moment, and certainly uses some technology that sort of grounds it in our current moment, somewhere in New Jersey area. I think Newark is likely the setting of this play.
It definitely is Newark, yep.
Mm-hmm. And so yep, it's kind of sitting there, and we meet four characters primarily that I'll focus us on in across the portion.
And then I'll stop interrupting you, but as I'm sure you're about to say, four characters, and then some other characters,
and then some other ones, yeah.
Question mark?
Yep. Our I think unarguably our protagonist is Tino, and Tino is this young boy. He's kind of heading to school, like very much like young high schoolish age.
I think they say that he's 12.
12, so yeah, maybe a little on it. Yeah. So more like middle school age. So we meet Tino, and we meet what we find out is his aunt Alnisa. We don't find that out right away. We know that Alnisa is sort of like a parent. And in the first scene, there's sort of some knowledge that they're not all as well between them, that eventually pays off further and further as we go along, and to the extent that in the sort of end of the scene she slaps him at one point, and we're sort of cued in right away that there is, whatever this parental relationship is, there is something amiss with it as well. However, we primarily are meeting Tino and kind of going with him to school. In the next scene, he's on his way to school, and as he's getting dressed for school, he's reading his Bible over and over. It's one of the things that Alnisa criticizes him for. and he's kind of poring over his Bible and wanting to talk about it, but is sort of shut down about it. He also talks about his friend Deja, who he saw at school the other day, kind of scratch her arm to the extent that it started bleeding, and she had to go off to the nurse's office after school. Although it was sort of like no one noticed. He was the only one who noticed, and once he noticed, he was made to like clean up the blood from her scratching. So a really kind of like shocking scene that he relays to Elnisa. But then in the next scene, we meet Deja, and she's kind of Tino's desk mate. She comes in. He's there early to kind of get himself set up. He's a very like prim and proper lad. He's wearing a suit all the time. He has all of his stuff sort of perfectly arranged within his desk. And as he gets set up, he kind of takes out his Bible and he's there reading. He shows up early so that he can kind of like be all set up and read there. But Deja shows up early as well, and they kind of have this moment of connection over both of them showing up in the moment, but also this like ability of Tino to see Deja in a really refreshing way for Deja. He doesn't ask a bunch of stupid, quote unquote, stupid questions about why Deja wound up needing to kind of scratch her arm to the extent that it caused harm to herself. He just is sort of like genuinely curious, to the point that like she eventually says, it's okay if you want to ask some questions about it. It's okay. And there's this really nice connection with them as they start to trust each other a little bit in this scene. We then meet Bernadette, who is the other kind of the four characters that I'll end up talking a lot about. And Bernadette is the lunch lady, sort of like a classic archetypal lunch lady in some way. She's kind of like lovingly abrasive to the kids that come through the line. But to Tino especially, she has like a warm spot in her heart for him.
I was listening to one of the interviews with Chisa Hutchinson about this play, and she described that part of why she was writing it was that she wanted to tell this story about people who don't normally get on stage. And of course, she was talking some about their socioeconomic status, their race, right? This is a play, about Black people primarily. And then she also described that the age was part of it, children and older people, for sure. That's definitely true. And characters who are like by nature curmudgeonly, right? That are just sort of like not totally likable all the time, every time. Deja and Bernadette, I mean, Elnisa for sure, but Deja and Bernadette as kind of the aligned with Tino characters. Neither of them are like they're both pretty abrasive.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. So and yet in amidst that abrasiveness, Bernadette has this sort of like fondness for Tino, who shows up late to the lunch line because he doesn't want to be kind of bullied or made fun of. And so he kind of shows up and is like very like present to Bernadette, and she's more present to him, and she's kind of comments on the fact that he's carrying this Bible with him. And she says, "Oh, you're reading the Bible, huh?" He's like, "Yeah, do you read the Bible?" And she's like, "Yeah, my favorite part is the Psalms." And he says, "Oh, I haven't gotten to that yet. I'll let you know when I get to that," etc. This act kind of continues. The notable thing in this kind of first scene with Bernadette is she like holds out a tray to Tino and drops the tray kind of before Tino can even like reach out in time to grab it. And her arm kind of hangs at her side without any nerve to it. And so this begins to happen more and more. We get a lot of these, like, as the scenes progress, and scenes with Deja and Tino continue to kind of show their sort of like little bit of more of a relationship. Eventually Deja gives Tino a kiss, and they kind of start this more like, middle school boyfriend girlfriend sort of thing. We get these
I guess super clear,
sort of
actually.
maybe just friends.
Friends, but she kissed it. I don't know. I'm not honestly sure how they would describe their relationship.
Fondness
like,
for
up,
each other. Yeah. But interspersed amongst these scenes in the first act, we see these sort of like Bernadette's alarm ringing and her arms not working. She can't like turn her alarm off. She has to like swing her arms across herself. And slowly Tino starts to notice this and start to kind of check in with her on this. Now he also invites her to church with him, because he ends up like kind of like running off to church on Sunday mornings, much to the sort of like shock of Elnisa one morning. Although not alarmed, she just continues to clean the house. But he kind of goes to church and gets these sermons on like sort of a pretty well preached, blessed to be a blessing sermon that he sort of internalizes. And so he like checks in with Bernadette about this lack of feeling that she has in her arms, because it's a recurring theme. She eventually like stops using her right arm in the lunch line, and so he checks in on that, and eventually goes the extra beat to like steal Alnisa's phone so that he can do research on what it could be, and then leave Deja hanging one morning in the classroom and go off to the computer lab to print off stuff for Bernadette about what these symptoms could likely be. And give them to Bernadette and kind of say like, you should maybe go see a doctor. And he's kind of like, it's sometimes like kind of shocking to Bernadette. She's like, why are you doing this? Stop this. You're a kid. But
shocking to everybody. Deja says the same thing to him. It's like I think Deja says something to the effect of like, she's just the lunch lady. You're a kid and she's the lunch lady. Why are you doing this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So there's kind of that sort of back and forth as sort of his care is sort of shocking to other people around him. He does also eventually invite Deja as well to church, and kind of additionally she's like, why didn't you invite me? Because he invited Bernadette in the lunch line, and he was like, well, you said that your mom doesn't want you to go to church, and so I didn't want to make you feel uncomfortable. So again, he's just this like very like conscious person. The act ends with eventually Deja going to church with him and another sermon from the preacher around sort of like hope and that sort of thing, and then a pretty like scary scene with Bernadette again in the middle of the night, waking up, her arm's not functioning, and she has to call 911 with like her feet to try to get help.
It's an extended scene in the stage direction with stuff she's got to do with her feet. I would not want to be that. I mean, think about the training you'd have to do as the actor playing Bernadette to pull that off.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So then Act 2 happens, and the rest of Act 2 is kind of this, like, how is Tino going to help Bernadette? Bernadette has called 911. She's in the hospital. We know to some extent that she was resistant to go to the hospital because she couldn't afford to go and get the care, but she is sort of forced into it. He shows up at the hospital to visit her. He called around the hospitals in the area saying that his grandma was there, and finds her eventually. He's reading the Psalms as she wakes up in one scene. And as it slowly begins to dawn on him that that she's going to need more help, and that it's probably a result of her having multiple sclerosis, he's like, well, you're going to need to see a neurologist. And so he goes about the process of like looking for a neurologist for her. And she's like, no, I'm not going to be able to do that. There's no way I could afford that. I'm going to get better on the steroids and then I'll just be better. But then hatches a plan sort of fueled by Deja and Deja's idea of GoFundMe, and Tino's latching onto this idea. They film a sort of video for Bernadette to try to get some money to help support her for her medical bills. And they launch this campaign, right? The other sort of big beat that happens in here is Alnisa really shows her colors, if she hadn't already. In amongst the scenes that are happening as Tino is trying to take care of Bernadette, he has a bad day at school where he like knows more than the teacher does and doesn't let go of the fact that he knows more of the teacher does, and so he's suspended for 2 days. And it's pretty clear that Alnisa beats him as a result of that.
With an electric cord. Oh,
yeah.
Gosh.
Mm-hmm.
Not on stage, thankfully, but he comes on pretty beat up from it.
And in addition to that, when she finds out about the GoFundMe campaign, she's like, oh, well, you're going to like send the check to me and I will cash the check. And sure, I'll give some to Bernadette, but I'm the one taking care of you. I should be the one who gets the money, and threatens violence against him again if he doesn't set it up that way.
She actually beats him in that scene on stage. It's a fairly specific stage direction about how many blows she's supposed to land. Interesting sort of just writing from Chisa Hutchinson there. You don't always see violence described that explicitly, but the line has some very specific moments where the blows rain down,
tied to specific words, and
right.
Yep.
I mean, that's hard. It's a scene on stage of a parent figure beating a child. That's obviously that's hard.
Yeah. To the point that he essentially runs away from home. He hides in the school for days. To the point that, as Jacob sort of alluded to earlier on, that his like clothing begins to get wrinkled. Again, he shows up to school pretty dapperly, but eventually people start to notice that his clothing is wrinkled because he's just flattening it out at the end of the day with a dictionary. And so eventually Deja figures this out and tells Bernadette. Bernadette catches him and says, "No, you're not staying here." And she learns why he's sort of run away, and she says, "Well, you're gonna come with me. You're gonna come sleep in my den. It's fine. I want to help you with this." And then we pretty quickly jump from there to her like sort of like saying to the principal, "I'm actually going to be taking charge of Tino." And to some degree she's been able, we sort of assume that she's been able to do the proper legal steps of noting that he's in an unsafe home sort of situation, and she's claiming him and guardianship over him in some way. It's clear that she's going to continue to do that as she advocates for Tino with the principal, and for his education. Now, all along, there's been this knowledge that the GoFundMe campaign is going to kind of come to fruition soon, and that when it does, it'll be a check that is mailed to the office because it isn't going to Alnisa. And so the kind of last beat of the scene, after she kind of confirms with the principal that Tino's going to get this sort of more like private school centered education with particular education and time spent on him, the principal says, "Oh, by the way, did you see that you had some mail?" And we all know as the audience that the check for the GoFundMe campaign has come through. That's the end of the play. That kind of is the kind of final moment of, we know the GoFundMe campaign succeeded. We know that Bernadette has kind of claimed Tino, and we know that Deja and Tino's campaign to support Bernadette has come to fruition.
Yeah, so this is a play about Tino's relationship with the Bible in some ways, but primarily about his relationship with Deja and with the lunch lady, and sort of the direction, as you described, they all head in. But we started this synopsis by talking about how there are somewhat other characters. So you've got Tino, you've got Bernadette, you've got Deja, and then you've got his aunt Alnisa. These are staged, on-stage characters. You also strangely have a janitor, but the script sort of implies that it should just be like one of the stage technicians dressed as a janitor. I don't really know if that's how it works, but so be it. But there are also these other off-stage characters. The preacher of the church that Tino attends, I think they have 2 scenes with the preacher. There is a teacher and there is a principal. And these characters have like extended scenes.
Yeah, multiple scenes.
Right. And so sometimes you see these off-stage characters in a play, and they have, they call on a line or two, or maybe even have like a short speech or something like that. But the idea of them being off stage is that they're kind of a limited role, and there's a practical, like, we don't want to have to pay an actor for this limited role. So can we make this an offstage character? So there's this practical relationship with the fact that they're a small role. I feel pretty confident in saying that's not what's going on here. For some reason, the characters in this play, the 4 staged characters in this play, doing extended conversations and scenes with a character who's off stage is part of the storytelling language. So just briefly, and then I'm interested in your thoughts. Tino and then Deja later in the scene you described have to sit like in a church pew and listen to 2 different sermons by this preacher and interact with it in some way. Tino has this going back and forth with the teacher, an offstage character, for, probably, like a 3 or 4 page scene. Both Tino and Bernadette have scenes with the principal, who, again, I just have to assume they're sitting, and I've seen some production photos, so I'm speaking a little bit from knowledge, that they sit and essentially look at the audience, and there's, I guess it's either a recorded voice or an actor or somebody backstage with a mic, I guess is possible, but it's nobody the audience sees. It's just a voice that they hear.
Yeah. This sort of like disembodied voice to some extent, but I think especially both the preacher and the principal, and I guess, and also the teacher, these are all 3 of them like authority figures.
Yes.
Like characters that have a lot of sway over either the opinions of the staged characters or the lives of the stage characters.
Yes, yeah, I agree completely. And the play starts with Alnisa. Alnisa is the first person that we see, which is a little just interesting to me, that given what the play's about, that Anissa is the first person you see. But she is right away playing kind of an offstage scene too. Now this one is like with a TV and with this,
Right, yeah.
version of the You Are the Father kind of television show. And so I don't know. What is the play saying something about those kinds of authority figures? Is it saying something about the kind of focus? I mean, I think in the beginning of the episode talked about how skillfully the play focuses our attention. This is certainly 100% a way of focusing our attention.
Yeah, yep. I think like there's so many little pieces in this play that we get little hints of that could be their own whole other play, right? Like we meet Deja through a story that Tino tells of her like scratching so much that she starts to bleed. We know that there's something else going on there. We know that like there's the school is like have this zero tolerance policy for talking back to teachers, and so there's a whole play that could be done around there. We have this like, you know, there's a big theme of Tino and his relationship with the Bible and with faith and going to church sort of out of his own accord, and there could be a whole play about that in there too. And to some degree, I think this play is a little bit about that, but not to the degree that like, you know, a staged preacher character would like go and talk to Tino on an individual level and we'd have a scene between them. Rather, I think these scenes do the job of filling out the world around Tino and explain to us that there's like a lot of stuff happening around him and he's being influenced in a lot of way or interacting with the world in a lot of ways, but then focuses our attention on especially the relationship he has with Bernadette and with Deja.
Yeah, sometimes when we think about plays, we try to figure out like, is the play, like, who is our lens into the world? Is this play a subjective presentation of the world through one character's eyes, or are we seeing a more objective, like, plays don't quite have third person or first person in the same way that prose does, but this is sort of a similar way to talk about it, right? Like, are we seeing the play from one person's perspective, or are we kind of living outside of it? This kind of a theatrical thing, where somebody would be an off-stage presence that's so influential in the play, is the kind of device that would make you think it's a first-person world. And yet, we also have scenes that Tino can't know anything about. There are, I think there's 3 different scenes in Bernadette's bedroom at night before she discovers her diagnosis, where her arms are not working. There's the scene between Deja and Bernadette where she tells him that she thinks he's sleeping here. There's the scene between Bernadette and Principal, which is the concluding scene of the play. And so it's a strange one to try to map like how these offstage characters, and they're either like, I guess, do they get an outsized importance or less importance? And then, like, how does that fit into us seeing a world where we see the private lives of all the characters, or at least 2 of the characters, both Bernadette and Tino?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's an interesting thought around, like, is the lack of presence adding focus or taking focus away, or not, or like moving focus off of? Because to some extent, there is this sort of like, I don't know, like if you're listening to either the principal or the preacher sort of have this sort of like off stage voice from above sort ofness, there's like something that says as well, right? Like this sort of like disembodied voice speaking over the characters in some way. And maybe that's a way into it too, of like this, the way that these characters are connected, and the way that the characters are kind of involved in each other's lives. 3 of them, right, in sort of like this sort of rich relationship, friendship way, and the other one is sort of this sort of like painful, out of necessity sort of way. Is the difference between these characters that kind of like float through their lives a little bit more.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting point, and it is also the case that like the preacher preaches these 2 sermons, right, and like what. For our sake, I don't know that, I guess the script maybe doesn't offer us the preacher so much as a character. And maybe that's like a sort of ridiculous thing to say. It probably is. But I think what I mean is like that sermon, because we don't have the ability to look at the preacher's face, all we can look at is Tino's face watching, engaging,
Yeah.
interacting with the preacher. And this is why at the beginning I talked about the play as having like some screenplay adjacent sort of feelings. And I believe we talked about this when we talked about Whitelisted a little bit too, that some of Chisa Hutchinson's, screenplay chops peek through a little bit. It is very much the case that like in a film, the camera directs what we can look at and our attention is directed in that way. That's much harder to do. Not impossible, but much harder to do on stage. And if you have a scene with a Tino and a preacher, we get to decide who we're looking at. And so it's almost like Chisa Hutchinson just turns the camera away from the preacher and into a close-up, to whatever degree your theater allows for a close-up, quote unquote, of Tino's face. But that is where our attention goes. We are not, maybe this is just, I'm just positing this, because Chisa Hutchinson could very happily say I'm wrong, and I'd be like, great, okay. But I'm positing that perhaps like the person of the preacher is not a huge importance, and that what is going on there is about what it does to Tino exclusively.
Yeah, absolutely. In both scenes, that's true. Both scenes have these like big, both sermons have these like big moments that like lock into Tino's. The first one is this sort of like sort of a brave a thing to do in a church service. But the preacher asks everyone to pull out their money and hold it up in the air, and to anyone who doesn't have any money to hold up in the air, not to feel ashamed of that, but to turn to their neighbor and say, "I need some help." And then he invites the people who have put up their money to actually help them in that scene, which is a brave moment for a preacher to do. But it makes an effect. It has a profound effect on Tino as a result of that scene. And you kind of go see like who he goes and tries to help as a result of that moment. The second one is this kind of true story that the pastor tells about his mother and about losing his mother eventually. And we like really get to know through the course of the play that Tino has this like really traumatic story of his mom kind of like shoving him out of the way, and in sort of a violent encounter with someone ends up getting shot rather than Tino. So both of these scenes have this like profound effect on Tino, and I agree that the focus of we just get to look at him hearing this really dials us into that.
Yeah, it does. And that makes, I think, the most sense in the church scenes where it's largely a speech. The preacher actually does go back and forth with Deja and Tino a little bit because Deja comes in late, and this is definitely like a cool preacher. He's like, it's okay that you're late. You're right on time for God. He's like, oh, great. Okay, cool. But there is some back and forth, but it's largely like a speech and somebody watching a speech. And so that like language of turning the camera towards the person watching the speech is somewhat familiar. But then you get these scenes that really are scenes. Tino versus the teacher. The teacher is like giving a lesson on grammar, and there's also like other classmates that like call out their answers, but it's really a scene between Tino and this teacher as Tino corrects her grammar, and they go back and forth around this. And then the Tino and Alnisa and the principal, and then later in the play Bernadette and the principal. These are harder for that language to take root for me, I think.
Yeah, there's almost like the thing that comes to mind for me is sort of like this sort of Charlie Brownish sort of.
Yeah, no, that's great.
That's
actually,
happening.
That's good. Yeah.
Like these sort of like characters that are like off focus, and these ones have lines obviously, but like exactly, especially the teacher scene. I feel like the principal has some like crucial information to give us,
right.
But the teacher scene, you almost know how this is gonna go based on just Tino's lines, and you kind of like assume from other context clues that this teacher is like, for instance, making him clean up the mess after Deja has bled on the desk.
First of all, that you can't do that. You can't make a kid clean up another kid's blood. Like that. Yeah. You cannot do that.
You can't do that.
Come on. But I think you're right. And like if we think about the Bernadette and principal scene that ends the play, where Bernadette's decided to take Tino in, and she comes to the principal to talk about essentially like high level genius kid kinds of programs that they can get Tino into. Tino certainly demonstrated that he is that. That is a scene, just Bernadette, just the principal, and the whole scene, and it ends the play, is her convincing him of this, right? Now that's a very like normal psychological realism scene. One character working on another, trying different tactics to get their goal. This is the stuff of drama that we're all used to. The thing that is strange about it is that the other character is not on stage. Right. And again, offstage focus is used all the time. So this is not, that in itself is not that uncommon. But it is the fact that it is this more traditional style of scene, but all we're getting visually is the Bernadette side. And so, you know, what does this do in terms of our appreciation of this scene? I'm suggesting that perhaps it doesn't matter as much that she convinces the principal. Like the principal's change of heart, quote unquote, is not that big a deal, is not that important a part of the scene because we're not actually seeing that. And in fact, like, you know, it's not that hard for her to convince the principal to change his mind. So it's not that big of a story element. So what is going on there? Whatever is going on there is about Bernadette. About the kind of person she was at the beginning of the play and who she is now as a result of what's happened in the play. And the playwright says, is I think maybe, possibly, again, I could be wrong, but I'm just suggesting that maybe the playwright is trying to help us and say, don't even worry about the principal guy. It's not about him.
Yeah.
It's not about him. Look at Bernadette. That's where the story's happening.
Yeah, for sure. I think you're right on with that. Yeah, I think all the data is there to be like, oh, this was a very easy interaction as far as like convincing the principal is concerned.
Right, for a scene that ends the play, you'd sort of suspect it would be harder.
Yeah.
For her to, you know, it seems like a big climax, but it's not really. And if you think the play is about whether Bernadette can convince the principal to get him into some crazy school, then you've obviously missed the point of the play. That's not what it's about, right? And so the staging element then is like hey, by the way, look over there.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And that is for Bernadette in that scene especially, because we've been on such a journey with Tino, right? Much of the play is look at Tino. But this last scene with Bernadette is this really great transformation for her character because she's been on this journey in this play of like we know that she's sort of like untrusting of a lot of these kids, and certainly untrusting towards Deja. We see a number of scenes where she's like, "Are you actually like being genuine with Tino?" And
she tells a fairly painful story about how she was treated by her own mother. And it is a similar story of abuse to Tino's, and and she says outright early in the play, and that caused me to not want children myself.
Yes. So for this scene to kind of show the transformation of I'm advocating for Tino, I'm taking him under my wing, being sure he's safe. And the sort of like slow journey of what sort of Tino sort of admits to sort of feeling towards Bernadette, which is like calling around and saying that she's his grandma, so that he can go find her. She sort of admits this line for her as well in the scene prior where she invites him into her home. She says, "This is what I would do for a friend, and I'm not your grandma, but I am your friend." So
I think it's important. It seems kind of odd a little, but that the final beat of the play is her hearing about this check. And she doesn't even necessarily know it's a check yet when in the action of the play. But I think one of the reasons why I think it might be important is what we learn from that is that she is not there advocating for him because he got her this bunch of money. I mean, the way I think we're supposed to assume what happened is that the GoFundMe campaign was successful, so they cut her a check and sent it her way. Now, earlier in the play, when Tino and Deja are filming their GoFundMe video, it's very clear that they're hiding it from Bernadette. But I think that after that point, it becomes kind of an unanswered question. Like, at what point do they tell Bernadette about this? And I think actually we're sort of intended to lose track of that question a little bit because it's a way to conclude the play to say, oh, by the way, Bernadette's change of heart here had nothing to do with the money. In fact, she did not know about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again focuses our attention, right? Because as we were building up to that moment, I found myself being like, oh no, what's going to happen when she finds out that they did this?
Right.
And that again is kind of a zoop, that's not the focus.
Yeah,
The
right.
focus is the journey of these two characters and their care for each other, and what they do because they care for each other. And so yeah, I think you're right on with this. I think the timing of it is particular, and needed to kind of have that payoff of this comes from sort of this unburdened, I guess, maybe, with the knowledge of that GoFundMe campaign, action as that Bernadette takes.
It's strange though, because you and I have said many times now, and I still do think that this is clear and obvious, that Tino is the protagonist of the play, and yet he's not in the last scene of the play. What do you make of that? That's very strange in dramatic structure. It's not totally out of the blue, but it's unusual.
Yeah, I mean, as far as a character that goes on a journey, Bernadette certainly goes on a journey in this play. I think if I were to try to make an argument for Tino as the protagonist, it would be something along the lines of the Czech sort of is Tino in the last scene. Right? So the Czech showing up in that last moment is sort of like the coming to fruition, because we're a little worried. The last time we know something about the check and the money is we don't know what Elnisa has convinced Tino to do, or if Tino has found a way to send the money. Now we have some clues, right? We know that he ran away. We know that he's staying in the school, that he's likely not, or trying to find a way so that he doesn't have to do that. But there's sort of the drama all the way to that last scene of, is this money still going to get to Bernadette? So yeah, but it is complicated because his journey is a shorter one, right? Like mostly his journey is like, do I do these things that I think I'm reading about in scripture and try to help people? And let's see how that plays out.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think, for Tino, like, what exactly is the inciting incident? One, you might say it's his reading of the Bible. Now, that starts before the action of the play. He walks in on stage and is already reading the Bible. So whatever causes him to, start investing in time reading the Bible is not something that we see. We do, I think, have a pretty solid sense that it's his first time doing it, that he doesn't come from a church-going family or whatever. He's doing something new, and something new is always something that we want to pay attention to. So maybe it's that. Probably a stronger argument for it's his friendship with Deja, or even maybe a stronger argument for it's the sermon that he hears about taking care of your neighbor that changes his life. Something in that zone begins Tino's journey of like testing the question that the preacher asks about, like, are you blessed to be a blessing? That sort of a thing, right? Like, is it better to give or to receive? Is that the sermon that this preacher offers him? And whatever Tino's journey is, it's something to do with all of that. And so, does that journey, is that question answered? Does that journey conclude in the final scene? Well, if that's what it's supposed to do, it's weird that he's not in it. But again, maybe it's about seeing that it did pay off for him in Bernadette taking care of him. If that were true, I don't know why Tino couldn't have been in that last scene. Like, why wouldn't she have taken him to the principal? Like, you could write, I guess what I'm saying is you could write that exact same scene story-wise and have Tino in it. I don't know.
Sure,
There's no reason why you couldn't, right? So this is, again, I think maybe Chisa Hutchinson's kind of carefully constructed eye pulling art that actually, whatever Tino's journey and story is, it really concludes in the scene in the classroom with Bernadette when she invites him to stay at her house. And the other part is the denouement. It's the new, sometimes we talk about stasis, intrusion, and new stasis. That's the new stasis. It's the denouement. It's the world going on now after the thing that happens in the play. It happens in that scene in the classroom when she finds him staying the night and she brings him home.
Yeah. Yep. And in that way, you kind of have that. There's some nice little symmetry with that, right? Because the first scene as well sort of becomes this sort of like prologue prior to maybe the inciting incidents for us is, oh, this friendship with Deja sort of starts things along in a different path for him. So there's sort of that stasis of, oh, this is where he's coming from at the beginning of the play, and then at the end, this is where he's
just
arrived.
to think about symmetry and parallelism, because I think that's really bright. If you lop off the scene with Bernadette in The Principal, and you just think about the Tino, at least what I've suggested is the Tino's part of the journey. So it starts with him at his home with Alnisa, and it is very much not a home. Right? I mean, he is in the first scene physically abused by his guardian. He's obviously uncomfortable there. He's wildly out of place. She nitpicks him about everything, right? Okay. Next scene is the scene where him and Deja, where that relationship begins. Then we have the whole play, right? And again, if you're lopping off with the scene with the principal, then the last two scenes of the play are the scene where Deja works on Bernadette and says, hey, I think something's going on. So now that Deja part of the story is coming, right? It's like wrapping in. Now that pays off. And then the final scene is kind of the final parallel but opposite of Tino at home. Now he's, at school where he's been staying the night, and Bernadette brings him to like a real home. A home where he's going to be like cared for and accepted. So the play begins with like not a real home, meets Deja, the Tino's part of the play, then ends with Deja, working to save him, Bernadette bringing him to a real home. And there is there's some nice parallelism there.
Yeah, for sure. And I do think that like slow trust of sort of like choosing people and building home together is something that all three of the characters are kind of on. It's sort of like maybe a tertiary subplot sort of level of like trying to find each other and trying to find resonance with that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, and there's so many other like little spectacularly good little writing things that are happening. Like I love at the end of the first scene, the reason why Alnisa slaps him is that she thinks he's lying about the girl who scratched her arm so bad that she bled all over, who we later learn is Deja. And like the scene switches and he's in the classroom and Deja's there with the bandage. So it's very much right away like, oh, nope, he wasn't lying. And it's almost dramatic irony because we learn something that Alnisa doesn't know, which is that he was really telling the truth about that. Really just lovely, touching little things like that. The way that when Tino comes home from going to church and Alnisa's vacuuming, the way that she interacts with the vacuum cord sets up the later thing that she's going to do so violently off stage, which is beat him with an extension cord. I mean, there's just good foreshadowing and payoff, good little reversals between the scenes. I mean, this is just solid, just like good, solid human story writing. And the way things are set up, paid off, negotiated over the course of the play. It's a touching little story. And again, I started off by calling it little and small, and I want to I mean that in the best way, in the way that means like most focused, most accessible, right?
Very
like it's
human.
so good in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the way, I agree that this play certainly focuses us. The way it like controls release of information too is really good. Like I started our summary with like saying who Alnisa was in her relationship to Tino, but you really only find out crystally who she is, that she's his aunt, not like a mother or exactly who she is a little ways into it. So there's like discovery along the way. The slow reveal of backstory is really great, and sort of piecing together what these characters all bring to the table as a result of like long, slow, trusting conversations with each other. It's really good. Lots of different things we could zoom in on and continue to chat about. Alas, we are nearing the end of our time for this particular episode, but the good news is the conversation doesn't have to stop here. We would love to keep chatting about this play with all of you on the interwebs. You can find us on the social medias we are on at the username at NoScriptPodcast. We also have a Gmail, noscriptpodcast@gmail.com. Find us on any of those sites, and we'd love to keep talking about Shirley Goodness and Mercy with you.
If you enjoyed this conversation or any of the other conversations from our 14 full and now a pretty good chunk of the way through 15 seasons of No Script, please recommend us to your family, your friends, anybody you know that likes conversations about writing, themes, characters, storytelling, theater, drama. People in your community theater, they'd be great. People in your theater class in high school or college, they'd be great. Recommend us, pass us on. That's how the podcast grows. They can find us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, all the places you get your podcasts. If you just need an easy, low-tech way for maybe the less internet-savvy folks in your life, they got a Facebook. Just like the Facebook page. Every Monday, the link will appear. Click and play from there. We are back every Monday. We'll be back next Monday. with another conversation about another great script. Until then, I'm Jacob. I'm here with Jackson on No Script, the podcast.